Got a hand for us?
I do. Okay, so this is at the Pepper Mill in Reno, Nevada.
Peppermill. They do that
Play fun.
weird, like, no one blind game, right? Something like that.
That's it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's no small blind. It's just a big blind. This is the 5NL game.
So it's
Uh,
0-5 NL.
it's it's really just 5NL. There is no small blind. It
Right.
just goes button and then big blind.
How did
Yeah.
they come up with that?
I'm not sure, but it is definitely the best poker room in Reno.
Uh-huh.
They are the only one that doesn't take a rake.
Yeah.
They take the $5 per half hour, similar to the way that it runs in Texas.
Yeah. Okay.
So, so anyway, we are nine-handed. I am in the big blind, and I am the effective stack in this hand against main villain at 775.
775 effective. Okay.
Yeah, this is the third or fourth hand at the table. I basically just sat down. I play the game pretty frequently, but I've never played with this villain before, so no reads
Okay.
whatsoever. So I'm in the big blind with the Ace of Hearts and Ace of Clubs.
Hero in big blind with ace of hearts, ace of clubs. Okay.
Yep. And there's a button straddle to 15. So it immediately reduces stack sizes here. I'm just over 50 big
Right.
blinds to start.
Right. But, as I talked about, this is another live hack. People don't really, they don't get in the same ranges as if the straddle is like the big blind. Like if someone's putting in, $700 of their entire stack, they're not really treating it like they're 50 blinds deep. It's 700. Just a thing of note. Okay.
So we have two limps, one in early position and one in middle position.
So you have aces in the big blind. It doesn't go to you guys first, and it goes.
It does not. Yeah, so
Okay.
it starts with under the gun and then it goes around and then it skips the button, goes to me, and then it comes back to the button.
Does a button always have like last ultimate action or some bullshit like that?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
correct.
Ultimate last. Okay. So, all right. So two limps.
So two limps, and then it's back around to me. And I like to raise to 85 here. I think it might be a little big. The standard raise in this game is usually 4x. Everybody pretty much raises to 20. And then obviously one additional blind per limper. This is just under that at $85. Don't know what you think of the sizing though.
I mean, the button's in there, right? So you can treat that as four limps. I mean, I think it's fine. I might even go larger to be honest, because it's limp for 15 goes through the button, right?
Correct. So it's like three limps basically.
I
Yeah.
think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I raise to 85.
Hmm.
The early position limper and the middle position limper both fold, and then
Okay.
the button calls. So the pot is $200.
And again, the button hasn't done anything.
That's correct.
Right. So button calls, closing the action heads up. And the reason why that's important is because he is heads up here because he sees the other guys
Correct.
fold, right? So it's not like he's overcalling or something like that. So it looks like right around 200 here, right?
Yep, right on 200. They take $1 drop for the bad beat, but
Okay.
so 199, I guess.
Yep.
So then the flop is the 10 of clubs, 10 of spades, 7 of hearts.
Okay.
And obviously, I think I'm going for value here. I chose a somewhat smaller sizing. I went $75, so like 37% pot. And just because I wanted to keep ranges wide, I'd like to see calls by all sevens, all smaller pocket pairs, five, six, eights, nines, jacks, as well as hopefully two overcards with a backdoor flush draw that decide to float. Although I do think it's somewhat important to note that I have the ace of hearts and the ace of clubs, so I do block a lot of the suited aces that he would be floating on the flop.
Well, if he's structuring correctly, I mean, you might giving this guy a little bit too much credit. But here's the thing, too. First of all, I think you can even um, get away with even a little bit of smaller sizing. But as I've said before, a little subtle thing here too is that sometimes with aces, when you specifically have aces, because you block the ace high calls, you're not going to get those ace high calls that you're trying to sort of dink and dunk. Versus like kings, you will get the ace high calls if you follow me.
Sure,
You know what I mean?
that makes sense. Yep, absolutely.
You bet 75. I actually might go a little bit smaller, and then I don't know what's going to happen, but even shaping this hand, it's probably going to be reflected a lot with a check on turn. And then if the guy checks back, then you can just, you just kind of hope that a low card comes and you just blast away. I don't know how many tens you have here in this spot. I mean, you might have ace 10 suited. I don't know if you're always raising up the suited broadways, but just a thought. So you bet 75, okay?
I bet 75, and he basically beats me into the pot. He snap calls. Um, I don't mean to like read into it too much. I think generally these snap calls lean towards draws, things like 8-9 suited, stuff like that. But I try not to read into it too much. I mean, I've seen guys do it with ace 10 here. So I don't know if you take anything from that.
Okay.
So yeah, the pot is 350.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to the turn, and the turn is the five of diamonds.
Okay.
So that completes the rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you mentioned here that you would see a lot of checks reflected here. I did not. I elected to continue betting, hoping to get value out of sort of the same hands that we discussed on the previous street, except for the ace high floats, I imagine are not likely calling
It,
anymore.
it's interesting because this one, I'm going to say something here in terms of sort of following me theoretically versus what I might do in a live game, which is a little bit on the backward side. So what I was going to say is that if I saw an overcard here, like a king or a queen, that's just going to get my opponent to fold out like everything, like small pairs and a 7x, I might do a lot of checking. Whereas with a low card, I might continue to do some betting because you're always going to continue to get called by worse. Why that's a little bit backwards. And the theory is that if you were trying to balance, you're probably supposed to bet the overcards, right? Because you'd be doing so like with ace jack, ace king, if like a queen came on the turn. So I can kind of get on board here with a bet again on kind of a low card. It's a total rainbow board. I think checking is fine too. But are you planning on trying to take this for three streets here?
So I think it depends. I did think about that for a little while. I think it depends on the river. There are some cards that I don't particularly like. Obviously, sixes and jacks complete the obvious straight draw. So those put a little bit of pause. And also, the river card that actually ends up coming, I think, puts a little bit of pause as well. So maybe we can go into that once we get to the river.
So how much did you bet here on the turn?
So I bet 175. So half pot.
That is a little bit on the larger side too. Remember, we don't want to dissuade him from calling with weaker. Now, with that being said, if people are just continuing to call down with any pair here, then obviously it's fine. I see some people I respect in the live chat saying, at this level, turn is a bet, and I tend to agree. Like I had said, I just might go maybe a smidge smaller here, but okay. So
Smaller.
you go 175. Yep.
Okay. And it's the same action as the flop he snap calls.
Yeah, because now I wonder, like, so now when you go 175 and he calls, now the pot is 700, and forget about what the river was. We'll get to what the actual river was. It looks like you have, like maybe, 500, 400 left in your stack, something like that?
I have I have 340 left
Yeah, that's
behind.
another thing too I didn't notice is that like you have a half pot size bet. So if you're going to take this sizing on the turn, then you're playing for stacks here, right? Because I was going to say like if you were, let's say that you were deeper in this hand, and let's say you had a pot size bet left here at the end. Like what were you going to do on a blank river? Not the ones that bring in the 8-9, but like a deuce. Were you going for three streets here?
Yeah, if it was a deuce, I was going for three streets. If it was a six, a jack, and I think maybe seven, eight, or nine, I might consider a little bit harder. But yeah, if it's a deuce, I think I'm going for three streets.
I just think that you've bloated this pot up so much now, where you have less than a half pot size bet. I don't know if anything is really the play here, but shove at the end. What's the river?
So the river is the seven of diamonds. So I actually thought this was a pretty bad river overall for me because I think there are a lot of sevens. So 7-8, 7-9, 7-6 suited that all feel like they have to call two here specifically on this board, and then they boat up on the river. In addition to obviously all of the tens that I think he has: ace 10, king 10, queen 10, jack 10. Um, and so I thought about if there was anything worse that I could potentially get value from on this river here. Maybe Jax is calling, but I was struggling to find worse hands that I thought were going to call.
Well, in general, I'm not a huge fan of check calling the river in live games. I always talk about that because people don't bluff enough and people don't value own themselves enough. But this really does look like a spot where I'm going to check. Now, what I find really interesting about this hand on paper here, the way that this hand is played out, is I actually don't think your hand is much different than ace high. And what I mean by that is that he's never, if you if you check, you checked, right? By the way.
I did check,
Okay.
yes.
So if he jams here for half pot size bet, he's basically saying he's got a boat. Like, I don't think he's jamming eights or nines because so many people are checking over pairs to check call in your spot, right? I don't think he's like merge jamming eights or nines to get called by ace high here. So if we throw those hands out, then your hand is the equivalent to ace high. But what also is interesting here is if like I double barreled like ace high. I mean, I know there were really no backdoors that came in, but yeah, you can imagine structuring some sort of ace high double barrel, like you picked up a backdoor, and then the river was a seven, and you have a half pot size bet left. I would very seriously consider check calling here on the river with ace high. Now, as a caveat to that, I will say that he doesn't really need to raise all that much because of the fact that the pot is so bloated. I'm talking about on flop or on turn. So that's one thing that's sort of going against you. But the reason why I would seriously consider calling with ace high, which I think is the equivalent to aces here in this spot, is because 5x, let's see here. If he somehow had, would he ever have 5x? He probably doesn't have 5x here on 10, 10, 7. The small pairs are all counterfeit here. So sixes, fours, threes, deuces, 8, 9, as you kept talking about, or like a hand like 8, 6, which is like a gutter that now turns open ended. They're all losers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're all they all have no showdown value. And it's it's funny because when you get into these spots where say it was like 10, 10, 5, right? Instead of 10, 10, 7, 5, 7, say it was 10, 10, 5, 7, 7. Then it's really a snap call for me because the 5x gets counterfeit, which is a pair on the flop. Here, it's just really hard for him to have a 5 here as played. But I just want to point out that your hand is the equivalent to ace high. I don't really see any difference between ace, ace, and if you had ace, queen here. So what ends up happening?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is more of a bluff catcher here. I was just trying to figure out what bluffs he has. He does end up ripping it all in for 340 effective.
By
So
the
the
way,
pot
he
is
could. I mean,
10.
he could have 5-5 here too. You'd be shocked. I mean, you'd have to be the guy would have to be really bad to check back 5-5. But I've seen it because obviously 5-5 beats anything but a 10 or a 7. So button rips for what 350.
340. The pot is 1040. It's 340 to call, so we're getting 3-1. I was just trying to
Before you
figure out
tell
if I'm here.
just before you tell me the answer, I just want people watch this live stream to learn, right? And I just want to I'm sure that we'll use this for the YouTube video, but for our best of and for the live chat streamers out there, I mean, you really should get yourself into a headspace here where I don't think that you should be calling here with aces if you're not calling here with ace high some of the time here too. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if someone had like ace high in there. Oh, I'm gonna just fold ace high, but then they level themselves into calling with like aces. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yep, absolutely. So I just started counting combos basically. The only bluffs I could come up with were the 9-8 suited, 6-8 suited that you mentioned. I did not consider the lower pairs that had been counterfeited, fives and sixes and stuff like that. So maybe those would swing it in a different direction. But I just thought he had too many tens and sevens, and I elected to fold.
I don't think I would have folded. I think it would have been. I think it would have been pretty tough for me to fold in this particular spot. Again, it's just one of these ones where, I mean, again, it's very, very close because you've taken such large sizing early on that because of the sizing you've taken, if your opponent is never raising because the pot is so bloated, it definitely becomes a harder call. But if you can sort of imagine a situation where you might be deeper where there is some raises, with 10x or something like that, then it becomes an easier call. But I still kind of want to call here. So hero folds, okay.
Hero folds,
Yeah.
and he turns over King Jack offsuit and laughs in my face.
Yeah. King Jack off for the villain, which, of course, as I said, if we had ace high, we would also win with ace high here, too. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, he's not structuring correctly, right? And again, I go back to what I had said in the earlier call too. Like, if I ever see a showdown sort of like this, then you obviously tag the guy as a bad player and you play, somewhat accordingly.
For
But
sure.
anyways, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Bart.